G'day and welcome to another Space Engineers Autopilot tutorial. This time we're not going to be looking at the vanilla Autopilot. Instead, we're going to be looking at Sam's Autopilot Manager, which is a script made by Magistrator. The link for this script is in the top of the description so that you guys can go and check this out for yourselves. The reason I wanted to look at this script is because in a lot of ways it makes making a cargo drone much simpler. And it does this by having a setup where you can move a ship between two docking points with just the press of a couple of commands. What I've got here is a ship set up with the Autopilot Manager script on board, with a bunch of buttons which do different things, which aren't labeled, which is unfortunate, but you know, we'll get into how to set that up shortly. What you can see on this little screen is that there are two configured docks. There's Alpha and Bravo. If we click the next button, it will then shift to Bravo. We can then use this Start button to get the Autopilot script to work. It'll now move the ship from this connector, up avoiding obstacles, and then down onto this connector. And one of the very clever things that this script does, which the vanilla Autopilot can't do, or at least can't do without a lot of trial and error and frustration, you may have noticed that the ship was facing in two different directions on these two connectors. And it's done that and managed to connect those connectors with the remote control block not set up over the top of the connector. With the Pitts anti-wolf drone, I deliberately set the remote control block over the connector so that it wouldn't matter which orientation the ship came in to its docking location. This script, however, does not need that to be the case. Saying that, it doesn't function so well when you have a horizontal connector. One of the problems with that, I'll demonstrate here. If I start this script, it's going to attempt to dock this ship to this connector here. The way that the ship approaches a docking port is from an up and relative to the remote controls position, backwards direction. So it'll come down at an angle like that. When this happens, unfortunately, often a part of the ship, including the connector, will collide with that connector and cause the ship to tilt. And once it's tilted, the remote control block can actually get onto the GPS marker and turn the whole script off. So no connection happens with the docking point. And that's unfortunate, but considering we can get much simpler docking with a vertical connector, I still think this script is worth using. And now it's time to demonstrate how we actually set up a ship like this. This one is a pretty ugly example, but functional. Let's go for something hopefully slightly less ugly. As we've shown, we need our vertical connector. And if we're going to make this a cargo drone, we need some cargo space. We're going to need a battery or two to power it. Let's pop down two of these. We're also going to need to have a cockpit. And we need the cockpit so that the script can calculate the acceleration that the ship can achieve in each direction. And it needs a reasonable acceleration so that everything functions properly. And I'll go into that shortly. So we'll have our cockpit. We also need, as on every ship, a gyroscope. We're going to need thrust in all 6 directions. The script actually asks for thrust of 2 meters, or acceleration I should say, of 2 meters per second in each direction. You can see that here. Keep forward, backward, up and down accelerations above 2 meters per second. For down acceleration, also take into consideration natural gravity. So these ships will take advantage of natural gravity, which is helpful. So we don't need many up thrusters for our ship. So now we have our thrust in all 6 directions and we have our gyroscope. Next up, we need to place our remote control block. And to do this, there's another element of this script that's important. It asks for your remote control block to be near the center of mass. and if not able to be near it, should be at least in the vertical line that crosses that. This avoids certain bugs with the script, and the script can actually tell you how far from the center of mass your remote controller is. In this case, it's 20 centimeters from it. To see where we need to place that, we go into our info, show center of mass, and we disconnect our ship from this landing gear attachment, since that's going to affect where the center of mass is calculated as. And right now it's pretty much dead center over the end of that thruster. And we can't really place it where that thruster is, so we could do this. Move that thruster to here. Center of mass is still pretty close. And then we place our remote control in our correct orientation right there. I like to have the remote control oriented properly so that the up and back or down and forward directions of movement actually line up with what I'd expect as I'm setting up the docking points. Next up, we're going to need the programmable block that actually runs this thing. So let's just pop it on top here. In addition to that, we're going to want a bunch of diagnostic screens, like the screens I've got here, but let's make them easily visible from the cockpit. And one relatively simple way of doing that is pop a couple of blocks out here. Then on top of those, we stretch out like so. We can then place some text panels. Put 4 of them along like that, and if you control click and drag in Creative, you can drag and build it in a line. And now it's time to set up the script. If we go down to our programmable block, click Edit, browse our workshop, and you'll see that Sam's Autopilot Manager is right here. We click OK. As usual, check code, compilation successful, and remember and exit. Now we need to set up the remaining blocks. Since there was only one remote control block on the ship, once we set up the programmable block, it actually renamed the programmable block with this open square brackets, Sam close square brackets. We need to do a similar setup for the text panels and for one block, which I just realized I forgot. As always, I do forget something. The script also asks for a camera on the front. So now that we've got a camera, so we'll rename this camera for the Sam script, like so. We can then go down to our text panels. We'll name this first one Sam Diag for our diagnostics. Oops, wrong bracket. Then we'll open one for the Sam log. So let's just call this one, we'll call this one Sam because that's the main one right in front of us. Sam log. And Sam GPS. Now that we've set that up, you can see that the Autopilot Manager is working. We've got no configured docks, and we've got no buttons configured to actually control this thing. To set up our controls for our Autopilot Manager, we go into our G menu, we select the programmable block, and you click Run. And you type in the specific argument for the command you want. There are 9 main commands for this script, conveniently as there are 9 spots along your toolbar. And I would suggest organizing this in the same manner each time so that you can gradually get used to where the commands are on your hotbar. I'm going to use the navigation commands first, since they're the ones I'm mainly going to be using, and they'll be on the 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll start with nav start. These aren't case sensitive. Then we'll go to nav stop. And these 2 commands start or stop our navigation regardless of where we're at. So if we click start, it'll go to our highlighted dock. Then we want nav far, which will navigate to the furthest away dock that we have in our list, and nav near, which will go to the nearest. Then we want to be able to register a dock, so dock register. And I'll go through each of these commands in more detail as we go to use them. Dock delete. Dock previous. And dock next. And the final command will be diag, which is our diagnostics command. So we'll start with our diagnostic command. The screen on the left is our diagnostic display, and if we click 9, it will change the display on there. What we've got, as we can see on the first screen, is that it says we've got the following screens: our menu, our guidelines, our remote controller, our thrust in each direction with all thrusters, then specific types of thrusters after that. So we'll go to our first thing, which is our guidelines, which we saw before. Then we see our remote controller. It is 0.5 meters from the center of mass. And with all of our thrusters, we can see that our acceleration in each direction is at lowest 11.25 meters per second, which well exceeds the 2 meters per second that the script requires. And that is all provided by our atmospheric thrusters, so they show up there. We got nothing from hydrogen, nothing from ion, so they'll all show up with errors. Right now we have no docks set up, so let's go set some up. Let's start with antenna number 2 over here, this base. So we line up to our dock. The script also asks that we make sure we're level, which conveniently for these docks will almost always be the case. And then we need to add this dock to our list. And we do that by pressing 5. And you can see now that we have a configured dock. And because we are at that dock, it is 0.0 meters away. On the right, we've got our exact GPS coordinates of that dock. And we've got our log of telling us what's happening on our third screen, on our second from the right screen. If we then move away from this dock position, you can see that we're moving away. And it is currently the highlighted dock. But what if we create a dock by accident right here, where there is none? You'll see that we've now got a Bravo dock. We can then switch. Oh, I think I've done something wrong. I just tried to switch from Alpha to Bravo, and you can see that I've actually typed in the wrong argument. Our logger says unknown dock argument previous. So we need to go into here. We need to delete our number 7. And we need to add in a new command because I did it wrong. It's dock prev. I accidentally typed the whole word previous. Now if we select 7, you can see that we're switching between these two locations. We want to make sure that we've got Bravo selected. Then we want to delete this docking position, which is number 6, and now it's gone. If we want to make sure make it so the ship navigates our way back to its docking position, we can press start since we've got Alpha selected, and we should get all the way to our dock. Let's see what happens as we do this. We can see it lining itself up to its original orientation, and now it's sitting nicely on the dock. But it hasn't locked to the dock. And there's a reason for that. There's an extra bit of setup we need to do. We need to get our connector and tell it that the script is allowed to control it as well. So we type SAM into it, and now if we move away, and we should still have the Alpha dock selected since it's our only dock, start again. This time, as soon as the ship is lined up perfectly over that dock, the script will actually force the connector to lock without us having to set up any complicated timers or any other special things. All we had to do was type SAM into the name and ta-da, we have lock. Now that we've got that working, let's unlock and let's set up a second dock. We'll register this new dock. We've now got an Alpha and a Bravo. We've got 2. Let's select Alpha and let's tell it to, let's quickly park The reason I wanted to park is that I don't know that I've got easily enough thrust to get away from this connector. So, since I'm currently connected, as soon as I press start to navigate to the alpha dock, it should disconnect that for us. And the autopilot will work nicely. So it goes up and back, then turns itself around. It's got terrain avoidance on, or crash avoidance, or precision mode, or something. Basically, it's going to avoid crashing as best it can. And then it will fly all the way to the other dock, and it will, again, like we've done with our previous dockings, turn off any crash avoidance as it gets close to that dock. And the way that it approaches the dock is this down and forward at a sort of 60-degree angle-ish sort of thing. And then it will get in that position and it'll dock again. And we can keep setting this up to go back and forth and back and forth. What happens if you want this ship to turn around after it's connected after a certain period of time? Well, once this is connected to a dock, you can actually have it trigger either a timer block or a programmable block. So we'll go through what you can do to get it to trigger a timer block. We'll build the timer block on there, hop in the cockpit, and to get the timer block to be triggered once the docking has happened, we can either set it up with SAM trigger, which will immediately start whatever actions the timer is set to have, or we can have it to SAM start, which will start with our countdown. So this is the equivalent of using either the start or the trigger now buttons. Start will use the countdown, trigger now will just immediately do the actions that you've set up. With our actions, if for example we want this to turn around and head to the next location, we can set up our programmable block to have a run, and we can have this set up to go to dock next. So that will change the dock that we're set up to. Then we can have it run with nav start. And this will happen after 10 seconds of docking. So let's check this out. Let's see if this works. We'll unpark, go up. We are still set to go to alpha, so we'll press 1. As soon as this docks, it should start our timer countdown. And then after 10 seconds, it should take off and head to our other dock. And then return to doing this dock after 10 seconds at that one, etc, etc. So we've docked. We're locked. Our timer is counting down. Let's watch our screens here. Our configured dock is still set to alpha. There we go. It's changed to Bravo. We've taken off and we're heading towards the Bravo dock. And that was all done with the timer. So if you've also got an inventory script that can control what's on board, or if you use sorters to do that, you'll be able to get this to dock, deliver, come back, and just keep flying back and forth between your docks with whatever time you need set up with your timer. And that was incredibly easy to set up by comparison to trying to do the same thing with the autopilot. What if you have an underground base and you need to get the ship into a hangar? Well, that might be a bit more complicated. Let's turn off our autopilot. So that I pressed 2, which we'd set up before. Let's fly over to this other dock I've got set up over here. It's a bit more complicated. It's actually set up slightly inside a hangar. We're all lined up. Let's create Dock Charlie. And then we're going to reverse out of here. And we're going to try and land at Dock Charlie with the autopilot. So we've got Dock Charlie set up. We're in front of it. Let's see what happens when we turn on our autopilot. It's going to go up. And one of the things this autopilot always does is go up. It's going to then go down and it's going to hit the roof. So it's not going to work so well in this situation. If you've got a complex dock, you're probably going to struggle to use this script. Unfortunately, even if we have our autopilot set up to get us into a position like this autopilot's still not going to work. So right now, SAM is on. Let's turn it off. So we've reset it. We're now 2.2 meters from the dock. And watch what's going to happen when we turn it on. So now we turn our autopilot on. It's going to turn around. And it's going to go up. and it's going to smack into the roof. It's going to go up again, and it lines itself up for that approach, which it can't actually achieve. So you're probably not going to want to use this autopilot on a base that is underground or for docking into a hangar. The last thing I want to check is just how well this performs with long distance waypoints. So I'm going to set those up and then we'll come back to that. So we've set up our new dock. We've then got these other three that are a fair way away. So let's set this to go to our 8,392 meter away dock and see how well the autopilot performs. And off we go. There is a mountain in between us, there's trees, there's valleys, there's all sorts of obstacles. And it looks like the autopilot has a very simple way of dealing with those, which is go very, very high. Oh, it's avoiding collisions, adjusting its trajectory. You can see what's going on with the log screen that's on there. We can also see its speeds. So it's actually moving across this distance quite quickly, a lot faster than I had anticipated it would be able to. I'm quite impressed with this script. Considering most of the time, if I was thinking of using an autopilot drone, I'm only going to be using it in an area that's fairly safe. Therefore, I can justify having exposed docking ports. I'm actually really happy with the limitations that it has. And the fact that it works with so little setup is just amazing. And it's made it 8.4 kilometers or so. And then it's going to go on to its next docking location after 10 seconds on this dock. There are a few things that I really like about this script. It allows for the use of cargo drones with far less effort to set up than what you would need to do it with the vanilla autopilot. It functions incredibly well, except for when you have to get underground. But that's a limitation that I can deal with, given that all I have to do is dock at my 2 points, and the autopilot script works out everything else in between. Originally, this autopilot series was only going to be a couple of videos looking at the basics, but I'm having so much fun with it, and with scripts like Sam's Autopilot Manager, there are worlds of opportunities that we still have to explore. So there's that and plenty more to come, so I'll see you then.